The other day, I was hanging out and minding my own business when I got this email from the social network Mastodon indicating that they had removed one of my posts I made way back in December, which read, "You may think Christmas vacation aged poorly because people today won't understand the boomer assumption that a Christmas bonus will cover the down payment on a pool, but it actually aged very well because the message is that you should kidnap your CEO at gunpoint to get what you deserve." They explained that they had removed the post due to it violating their guideline, no incitement of violence or promotion of violent ideologies. Little old me inciting violence? I appealed, explaining, hey, this is just a silly joke about capitalism, but it did make me wonder if someone out there were a huge fan of mine, but could not understand humorous exaggeration, and immediately after reading that, they drove their beat-up RV to their boss's house, pointed a shotgun at him until he agreed to give out Christmas bonuses. Would I be guilty of a crime? Would I ethically be in the wrong? And would I feel bad? No. End of video. Bye. Okay, just kidding. Today I want to talk about something called stochastic terrorism. And unfortunately, we are going to be getting into some pretty gross and gruesome topics like murder and bullying and suicide. So if any of that is particularly upsetting to you, you might want to give the rest of this video a miss. I was actually thinking a lot about this topic even before I got that notice from Mastodon, thanks to the recent interview Taylor Lorenz conducted with Chaya Raichik, the awful human behind the Libs of TikTok account. Raichik absolutely hates trans people and immigrants, and so she uses her large platform to target those kinds of people with hatred and mockery and threats. Her fans are then free to go off and harass these otherwise random, innocent people as they see fit, which people almost immediately began to notice. You know, Raichik's current profile pic is her proudly holding up a copy of the front page of USA Today with the headline, "When Libs of TikTok posts, threats increasingly follow." Here's one example I will pick at random. In 2022, an English teacher in Oklahoma named Tyler Rinn posted on social media telling LGBTQ students who had been shunned by their parents that he was proud of them and he loved them. Raichik posted him on Libs of TikTok, after which her followers doxed and harassed him until he apparently resigned. But wait, it gets so much worse. In January of this year, the Oklahoma State Superintendent of Public Education decided to name Raichik, who lives in Los Angeles, California, to the state of Oklahoma's Library Media Advisory Committee so that she could help them fight the woke left in their schools. The following month, Next Benedict, a non-binary student in the same Oklahoma school district Rinn was bullied out of, was severely beaten by classmates in a restroom after at least a year of relentless bullying over his gender identity. Benedict preferred either he, him, or they, them pronouns, for the record. Next, Benedict went to the hospital for treatment where a police officer dissuaded his family from filing a report because it would be a shame to get those students in trouble over something so minor. Benedict was sent home where he collapsed and died the following day. The police and medical examiner have concluded that he died of suicide, while many people, including Benedict's own family, are understandably suspicious of that decision, and they are continuing to investigate. Regardless of whether or not Benedict died directly from the brutal assault or from suicide as a result of the brutal assault, it's clear to me that Chaya Raichik has blood on her hands. This is a concept relatively new known as stochastic terrorism. It's so named for a statistical phenomenon in which an event may have a high likelihood of occurring, but you cannot predict when or how it's going to happen. In this case, the stochastic terrorist is not one of the kids who physically assaulted Benedict, but Chaya Raichik herself. She didn't land the punches, but she instigated the attack with her posts. Lucky for Raichik, stochastic terrorism by definition comes with a built-in plausible deniability. She didn't tell anyone at that specific high school to find that specific student and beat them up. She just happened to target LGBTQ students on a platform with millions of followers, mocking and dehumanizing an already marginalized group in Benedict's very school district, which she now helps oversee somehow. We couldn't predict who would actually commit the violence or how or when or where or on whom, but the larger RightWing's audience grows, the more time she targets a particular person or area or marginalized group, the greater the chance is that something bad is going to happen. It's that plausible deniability that makes stochastic terrorism legal here in the United States, protected by the First Amendment. RightWing knows and enjoys this, as you can see in this tweet where she responds to the Oklahoma Pride Alliance, which didn't even mention her. Please share the information on how you know this is a direct result of hateful rhetoric. It's the terrorist equivalent to, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. RightWing somewhat hilariously thought that stochastic terrorism was a term made up just for her, which should illustrate not just how often her posts lead to this type of violence, but also how stupid and narcissistic she is. In reality, of course, she's just the latest in a long line of stochastic terrorists like Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson and Bill O'Reilly, the latter of whom, of course, repeatedly called Dr. George Tiller the baby killer on his popular Fox News show until an anti-abortion activist shot Tiller in the head in 2009, killing him. O'Reilly, of course, denied all responsibility. He didn't tell anybody to go shoot him in the head. He just told his giant audience that this man was an existential threat. And what happened was going to happen. Plausible. Since this is a fairly new concept from, the past decade or two, sociologists are still working out exactly what does and does not count as stochastic terrorism. For instance, in the 2007 book, The Age of Lone Wolf Terrorism, Mark Ham and Ramon Spage give as one example of stochastic terrorism Floyd Corkins, a gay rights activist who planned to commit a mass murder at the Anti-Gay Family Research Council. And he chose them because the Southern Poverty Law Center had listed them as an anti-LGBTQ hate group and had their headquarters marked on a map. He was unsuccessful, by the way, in carrying that act out. Dr. James Angove, senior researcher at the Max Planck Institute for the Study of Crime, Security, and Law, argues in this paper from last year that without considering the intent of the alleged stochastic terrorists, we risk an overly broad definition that would allow the actual hate groups to play victim. SPLC never intended or encouraged anyone to murder people at the Family Research Council. They just correctly labeled them as an anti-gay hate group. Similarly, if someone murders Haya Rychik because USA Today labeled her a stochastic terrorist, that doesn't now make USA Today the new stochastic terrorist. Or me, by the way, just to be clear. Please don't murder anyone, even people I don't like. Thank you. But by describing how these people might fall into this definition, it wouldn't make me the stochastic terrorist if someone went out and decided to murder them. And on that note, in addition to intent, Angove argues that it also matters whether the alleged stochastic terrorist is targeting someone rightly or wrongly. Things may be different had SPLC included a random animal shelter on their map of hate groups and someone went there to murder people. If someone prominent, I don't know, let's say Elon Musk, spread information that the Democratic elites were using a Washington, D.C. pizza place to harbor child sex slaves, and they really were, then that would be good and helpful of him to signal boost that. But if that isn't true, if that is just a completely bananas made up lie, and someone goes to the pizza place with an assault rifle, then that is very, very bad. That would be a terrorism. Oops. I agree with Angove on these issues. We may not always be able to know the true intent of a potential stochastic terrorist, and we may not always know if something is entirely true or if it's complete disinformation, but we aren't idiots. In most cases, reasonable people can work through these issues in order to get a good idea of what is and is not stochastic terrorism. He even includes this very helpful example. Left-wing groups of the 1970s and 80s agitating against capitalist oligarchs. If the rhetoric of such groups putatively inspired violence but consisted of such true claims as those about, say, capitalist exploitation of labor, differential ownership of the means of production, and so forth, then we could hardly look to the speakers as providing anything inflammatory to violence. Thank you, Dr. Angove. I will be sending this to Mastodon immediately in the hopes of getting my post reinstated. Anyway, he goes on. On the other hand, were there claims, poised in front of an audience with heightened fear and worry, to include that workers in some factory had been beheaded over minor transgressions, that the bosses were not merely selfish, but also animals, virus-like, or a different race or species, and so on? In such a scenario, the language used is far more obviously inflammatory, and it is so because of the exaggerations and outright falsehoods it contains as part of the demonization. This sort of falsity in speech further that is not uttered mistakenly. That's why, Angove argues, dehumanization is also an integral part of this definition of stochastic terrorism. Dehumanization with intent and with misinformation or a desire to distort the truth. Now, you may notice that the only clear examples I've given thus far of stochastic terrorism are all from the right wing, and the examples from the left wing are more complicated and not actually fitting into this definition. Is that because I'm biased? No. I mean, I am biased. Obviously, I am biased toward the left, but Kurt Braddock, the author of the 2020 book Weaponized Words, The Strategic Role of Persuasion in Violent Radicalization and Counter-Radicalization, had this to say in an interview with Vox. If we just look at the data at the number of attacks that have occurred, the number of people who've been arrested for plots, the number of individuals who have actually cited things that have been said by elected leaders, the right-wing violence far outpaces left-wing violence. That's not to say that it hasn't happened on the left, but if we look at raw numbers of how much it occurs, and even scarier, how often it seems that right-wing public officials seem to be perfectly happy to use it as a persuasive communication strategy, it's not even close. While left-wing politicians tend to vigorously condemn violence done in their names or to their opponents, right-wing politicians tend to simply ignore it in the best circumstances, and in the worst circumstances, they appoint the stochastic terrorists to their state committees overseeing school libraries, which is terrifying, to be blunt, which is the point of terrorism. It's very unlikely that you or I will be the direct victim of this kind of violence, but we are all affected by the chilling effect of this type of terrorism. We may be less inclined to be publicly gay or trans, to less inclined to rock the boat, less inclined to stick up for each other if we're constantly worrying about where that next lone wolf is going to pop up. So what do we do about it? Obviously, a little moderation on platforms like Shitter would be nice, but let's not get crazy. Braddock points out that we can take lessons from the people who have been studying misinformation for decades, how it spreads, how to stop it. They've actually found, for the most part, that the best cure we have is simple prevention. Specifically, we can inoculate people against misinformation and also against radicalization. What I might do is go to somebody and tell them, listen, I know you're not violent. I know you have no intention of becoming violent, but there are these actors out there who are going to make certain statements that will justify violence against others, and they're trying to get you to consider maybe engaging in violence. Then you provide the target with different counter arguments against that particular idea or that particular course of action. There's 60 years of research on this strategy, typically in health communication and more standard political communication. If I provide someone with an inoculation message that undermines the strategy of this implicit incitement, if I get to those people and tell them about this particular strategy before they're exposed to it, they're much less likely to be influenced by it. I think this goes part and parcel with just a larger emphasis on media literacy in the United States. We are so media illiterate, not just kids who are kind of engaging with online content, disinformation, and conspiracy theories with nothing to defend themselves against it, but adults too. We need to help people do a better job of parsing apart ideas that they see online and recognizing when they're being manipulated. So there you go. That's your homework, I guess. Go forth and give the Fox News vaccine to someone in your life, if it's not too late. If it is too late, again, I cannot stress this enough, do not enact violence upon them. Unless they're your boss and it's Christmas Eve and you get a Jelly of the Month Club membership instead of a down payment on a new in-ground pool, then maybe some light kidnapping would be in order. I'm kidding. Don't do that. Guys, don't do that. Historically, things have always gone very well for me when I suggest to my audience, don't do that. So this will be fine. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.